I've noticed that many things come to the man that needs them, and needs them for a really important reason. Not fate or kismet, not divine intervention or providence. We get ourselves all ready for the critical moment and adapt ourselves to the favoring environmental influence eagerly and instantly, as quick as a shark will grab some lazy fish. And so it sometimes seems to be almost prearranged for us. At about the time I was beginning to develop my work in a broad, comprehensive, sweeping fashion, an incident occurred that crystallized everything for me. A man wanted 20,000 prune trees delivered within 9 months because he was in a hurry to plant his orchard. No one could accept the order because there were few nurseries in those early days, and the ones there were didn't have the stock. I was approached. I didn't know how it could be done, but my brief experience in working with nature instead of following set rules made me feel there ought to be some way. I had neither 20,000 prune trees nor any place from which to get them. But I began to reason it out. I've made it a rule in all my life, by the by, never to sign papers or obligate myself to anything of importance without letting the proposition lie around in my mind for 24 hours. On this prune tree proposition, I needed the time and took it. The next morning I accepted the order. Now, I was not only given a chance to try out some of my theories about this collaboration with nature of which I have spoken, but I was squarely up against the necessity for doing it. For some time I had realized that there were two entirely new channels through which to move in training plants to work for man, and this prune order made it necessary for me to put both of them into employment. First, I felt sure that I could bring about, in a few plant generations, what nature required hundreds or even thousands of years to achieve. Secondly, I saw that such experiments as I would have to conduct must be performed, not with one or half a dozen plants, but on a broad scale, literally by wholesale. In short, to borrow the language of industry, I not only had to speed up production, but I had to build up and maintain quantity production. Nature, as I have already shown, appeared to me to demand or require or call forth variations and the adaptation of those varieties to new environments. But she had all the time there was and all the raw materials she needed. She could be wasteful and extravagant on one hand, and leisurely on the other. She worked with birds and bees and other insects in cross-pollination. She was assisted by all sorts of accidental hybridizations. She sowed seeds far and wide, employing floods and winds and glaciers and migratory birds and animals. These were only a few of the agencies used. She made millions of trials and had millions of failures. But she had no reason to be concerned about that. She wasn't under contract, and no one was writing her indignant letters beginning, "In the matter of the shipment of pine trees ordered from you 500 years ago from our temperate climate, that beg to advise you that same has not yet arrived." No, nature employed the system of trial and error, and yet eventually there was dispersed over the whole earth the multitude and infinity of plants and shrubs, vegetables and flowers, fruits and vines, both that we find in the wild state today, and that, working with the wild plants and foundations, man now has to fill his gardens with delight, his orchards with plenty, and his fields with wealth. I could learn my method from nature, but I was not compelled to accept her schedule. I was convinced that, by following her system and learning lessons from her open book, man, with his developed intelligence and his lately acquired habit of aiming at a definite goal, could get, in plant breeding, what he wanted, where he wanted it, and eventually about when he wanted it. The prune tree order was necessarily a wholesale job, where I could try myself out in handling large numbers, but primarily it was a test of my ability to accelerate nature's methods by intelligent employment of her laws. The first requisite for the new venture was a sturdy but rapidly sprouting tree stock, and I chose the almond because, unlike nearly all stone fruits, it takes hold readily and grows quickly. I found 20,000 almond nuts of even quality, spread them on a bed of coarse sand, covered them with burlap, and on top of the burlap put a layer of sand. The purpose of this arrangement was to enable us to examine the sprouting nuts daily without disturbing the roots. In 14 days, a few of the seeds had sprouted and were picked out and put in the nursery beds. As fast as sprouting occurred, the planting followed, and by the last of June, those almond seedlings were up high enough to be budded. Meantime, I had arranged with a neighbor to furnish me with 20,000 prune buds, and early in June and all through that month and part of August, I had a large force of experts budding the prune buds into the almond seedlings. After about 10 days, I found the buds would make good unions with the stalks. Then, in order to force all the nourishment into them, I had to find a way to eliminate the almond side of the family without killing the young trees. If I had cut the almond twigs and leaves off summarily, the seedlings would have died. If I had cut the almond twigs and leaves off summarily, the seedlings would have died. Instead, I broke off the tops and left them hanging. There was still a connection, but most of the strength of the little tree was diverted into its adopted child, the prune bud. The plan worked perfectly. The prune buds took hold bravely, and in a few weeks, what had started out as an almond was a prune, and flourishing mightily. By December 1st, 19,500 prune trees were ready for the order, and the delighted customer said I was a wizard and paid the bill with great satisfaction. That satisfaction, I do not need to add, was mutual, because I had not only proved my theory that nature could be hurried and used and directed by man, and in wholesale lots, but I had a silver jangling in my pocket and the necessary capital to go on with the great work this first effort now opened wide to me. Ever since that time, I have worked on a quantity basis, speeded up. This does not mean that I ever overlooked quality. On the contrary, it was only to get quality, and a very definite sort of quality at that I was working at all. I have had as many as 10,000 separate and distinct experiments going on at one time. I've produced as many as 500 varieties of plums on 12 trees in one short row. I've had in my gardens as many as 8,000 different varieties of roses, irises, or gladiolus. Every one of these was obtained by using natural processes or adaptations of them, and every one was there because I needed it in my search for a definite quality or characteristic. I took nature's mind and added to it my own, that knew exactly what it wanted and was in a hurry, comparatively speaking, to get it. How did I operate in carrying on these experiments? This is not a manual of hybridization and selection. I fancy you would find that pretty dull reading. But the general underlying principles of the work may be mentioned, and they seem doubly important to me because they concern all life, and if they are rightly read, will throw light on a lot of the puzzling facts of our existence and of the existence of conditions which we find about us and with which we have to contend in the struggle and loss and gain of our lives. I have referred to the importance of combining our heredities so that we get variations, powers and characteristics and capabilities and possibilities that could not come to us from one straight and undeviating line of ancestry. Compare the Chinese and the native-born American, and you will see what mixing up the strains can do. The Chinese have, to be sure, absorbed several alien bloods in the centuries past, but pure Chinese has been the dominating influence on all the people. The result is that they are conservative, not adaptable, with cautious minds and reactionary tendencies, worshipping their ancestors and the past and not looking forward nor trying to improve themselves or their own conditions. Occidental influence, environmental, is beginning to stir them up some, but the hereditary pull is too strong. Nothing will radically alter the Chinese race but crossing with some other strains. The American, on the other hand, is related to most every white race on this planet. We have English tenacity, French enthusiasm, Celtic impulsiveness, German inventiveness, Scandinavian loyalty. Some of the best and a few of the worst tendencies of a mixed heredity. The result is that we will tackle anything, and while we may brag and blow a little too much, we usually come out with what we went in after. That is crossing. That is, in a sense, hybridization. The tiny cells in which the life force is stored meet and are united. The tiny cells in which the life force is stored meet and are united. If there is the same heredity behind each, the mating is smooth and uneventful. But introduce a strange or alien heredity, and there is an explosion such as you would get from touching off 10,000 tons of dynamite in a concrete warehouse. The atoms fly in every direction. Everything is broken up at once, and millions of tiny constituent particles are blown entirely out of the record. Some few unite, and from them come the new individuals, having something of both heredities, and yet new characteristics and characters and tendencies and potentialities not to be accounted for by anything we can put our fingers on in the past lines. I often think that I had something to do with dignifying the word hybrid. I hope I did, because hybrids are what make the world go forward. They give us our inventors and poets, our dreamers and leaders of the earth. And in the plant world, they are the fragrant and gracious flowers, the luscious and nourishing fruits, the succulent and meaty vegetables. Have you ever noticed that the most intelligent, the most loyal, and the most friendly dog is usually a mongrel? A cross between two good strains, with a little sense of humor interjected from some early indiscretion on the mother's part, with a dog who was not all he should have been? This is not to say that all mongrels turn out well. Most of the litter in which your smart dog was whelped will be hardly worth drowning. But the combination of heredities often eventuate in an individual pup or cat or mule or man or flower or fruit that will stand out away beyond of his fellows or of his parents, because from all the possible hereditary influences in all the lines behind him, the best have happened to be caught in his particular bundle. That super intelligent and valuable mongrel dog of yours is a hybrid. The explosion caused by the meeting of the alien cells has resulted in good characteristics from all the respectable families behind him, and a little saving grace of original sin from the gardener's dog. In my work with plants, I deliberately crossed different individuals and varieties. This is an operation that looks simple, but whether you get results or not depends on your gift and practice and hand and eye. I like the old story about the great artist who was asked with what he mixed his paints to get such marvelous results, and who answered, "I mixed them with brains, madam." He didn't mean brains precisely. He meant his own gift for color and for its application to the canvas. Pollinization can be learned by anyone, but only a few have the instinct that gets results. That is no credit to them. It is just given them, like red hair, or Edison's genius for chemistry and physics, or a good cook's pie crust. This hybridization was done in nature's gardens by the insects, the birds, the winds, and so on. In the plant experimenter's grounds, it is done by hand. Nothing left to chance or occasion, but all planned and timed and regulated. There is the first step in the plant development. The second step is selection. Nature selected by a law of the survival of the fittest, that is, inherent fitness, the fitness of the plant to stand up under a new or changed environment. It was the plant's business and had little or nothing to do with what man would consider, from his standpoint, the improvement of the plant. There is a kind of grass that grows on the Pacific coast that shoots up tall and straight in protected spots, which is its natural home. Seeds were carried out along the seashore, though, where the wind blows hard and constantly. The grass had to accommodate itself to this new environment. Many of the plants died, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. But those that bent themselves to the wind and survived put a new quality or tendency into their seed. In generations, the pull of heredity to make the grass tall and straight had been overcome to such an extent that the grass was dwarfed and almost crept along the ground. The environment had changed the nature of the plant, and now we find two kinds of grass of precisely the same original strain, yet so different now as to be almost unrecognizable as the same variety. Plant a seed from the tall brother along the shore, and it will almost certainly be killed by the wind. Plant one of the dwarfs in a protected spot, and it will continue to grow dwarfed for some generations, if it survives. It might not live, though, because the soil that had once been its home, or the particular temperature or moisture condition that favored its brother, might not be suitable for it in its new character.